I didn't mean to look at her that long. Honestly, I didn't. But the moment stretched in that strange way moments do when you realize something in your life is about to tilt, even if you don't know how yet. It happened on a slow Wednesday afternoon at the auto repair shop where I worked. The kind of day when the air feels heavy with old rubber and dust, and the ticking of a cooling engine is the only sound brave enough to interrupt the quiet. I was tightening a belt on a Corolla when the front door chimed, soft, like whoever walked in didn't want to disturb anyone. I looked up. She stood just inside, sunlight behind her, turning the edges of her hair a warm copper. Mid-40s, maybe. Confident posture, but not the kind that tries too hard. More the kind that comes from surviving things and learning to breathe after. Her eyes scanned the shop slowly, taking everything in with this deliberate calm that made the whole place feel smaller, like she'd just taken control of the room by existing in it. She stepped toward the counter, heels quiet on the concrete, and started speaking to Pete, my supervisor. I wasn't close enough to hear her words, but her voice had this low steadiness to it, like a quiet instrument tuned perfectly. I should have gone back to work. Really. But something in me hesitated, like my hands forgot their job. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't dressed like someone who wanted attention. Jeans, a soft sweater the color of early morning fog, a leather bag worn just enough to show it had a history. But there was something layered about her. Something in the way she listened more than she spoke. Something in the way her fingers traced the paperwork Pete handed her. Slow, absent, thoughtful. And then she glanced over. Just a quick flick at first. But then she looked again. That second look pinned me. I froze halfway between tools, like some idiot who forgot how gravity worked. I don't know what expression I had, but it must have been obvious I'd been watching her longer than polite. My face heated up instantly. I started to turn back to the car, pretending I suddenly remembered a life-or-death bolt that needed tightening. But before I escaped fully into the hood of the Corolla, I felt it. This small shift in the air. I glanced back. She was still looking at me. And then she smiled. Not a big smile. Not a hi there smile. It was softer, almost private. The kind people give when they're acknowledging something without naming it. Like she was saying, "Yes, I saw you. And no, I don't mind." My chest tightened a little. Pete told her I'd be the one handling her car. Something about diagnostics. Nothing exciting. She nodded, then walked toward me, footsteps unhurried. I wiped my hands on a towel I didn't realize was already dirty, which only made things worse. "Is it okay if I stand here?" she asked, stopping just close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Something warm, understated, with a hint of citrus. I like seeing people work when they actually care about what they're doing. I swallowed too quickly. "Oh yeah? Sure. I mean, yeah, that's fine." Her lips curved the tiniest bit, like she'd expected that answer. For a few moments, she just watched me run the scanner, her gaze steady but never intrusive. It made my palms feel warm in a way I couldn't explain. Every now and then she'd ask a question, simple ones, but the way she listened made me feel like the only person in the room. When she finally stepped back, ready to leave the shop while I ran the full test, she paused like she wanted to say something else but changed her mind. Instead, she gave that same small smile. The one I've been trying, and failing, to forget ever since. The second time I saw her, it wasn't planned. She came back 2 days later, just as I was closing up. The sky outside was fading into that bluish-purple shade that makes everything feel quieter than it is. I heard the door chime, sharp against the evening stillness, and there she was again. Same calm posture, same steady eyes, but something in her looked heavier, like the day had been tugging at her sleeves. "Sorry, are you closing?" she asked. "No. Well, yeah, but it's fine. I can help." The words slipped out faster than I meant them to. She hesitated by the door, one hand gripping the strap of her bag a little too tightly. Not fear. More like she was deciding if she had space left in her day to deal with another person. The engine light came back on," she said finally. "I was nearby. Didn't want to make an appointment again." Something flickered across her face. Annoyance at the car, maybe, or herself. But it was gone before I could label it. "Yeah, I can check it," I said, grabbing the scanner. She followed me to the car parked just outside. The air was cool, the kind that settles over your skin quietly. She stood close enough that I could see faint tension in her jaw, the subtle way she pressed her thumb into her palm when she thought no one was looking. "You okay?" I asked before thinking. She didn't answer right away. She glanced toward the street, as if searching for the right words in the headlights passing by. "Long week," she said finally. "Too many people needing too many things." Her tone wasn't sharp, just tired. And I noticed the little details, the slight redness around her eyes, the way her shoulders dipped forward when she exhaled, the soft lines near her mouth that deepened when she wasn't forcing a polite smile. I wanted to say something comforting, something that didn't sound like a kid trying too hard. Instead, I focused on the scanner. "Your sensors probably aren't reading correctly," I murmured. "Nothing serious." She nodded, but didn't seem relieved. More like she wasn't really listening to the words, just the tone. When I finished, she leaned against the car lightly, arms crossed. Her fingers tapped against her elbow, small, restless movements she probably didn't notice. I caught myself watching those hands longer than I should have. They looked strong and soft at the same time, the kind that had done a lot of real living. She noticed me glancing and quickly uncrossed her arms, almost like she'd revealed something she didn't want to. "You always stay late?" she asked, shifting the focus. "Only when someone needs help," I said before I could filter it. She breathed out a quiet laugh, not loud, but warm enough that it curled around something inside me. The sound felt like she hadn't laughed much that day, maybe not all week. When I handed her the keys, our fingers brushed. Barely, but she froze. Not visibly, just a small pause in her breath, a 1-second delay before she took the keys fully. She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain the reaction, then stopped herself. "Thanks," she said softly. She stepped back, turned toward her car, but halfway in, she looked at me again. A long, searching look. The kind people give when something inside them shifts and they're not sure if they should acknowledge it. I didn't say anything, and she didn't smile this time. But whatever passed between us in that quiet, lingering moment felt like a door cracking open just a little, just enough to make me want to step closer. I wasn't supposed to see her again that week, but life doesn't care about timing. Or maybe it cares too much. It was raining hard that evening. One of those storms that shakes the streetlights and turns the whole town into a blur behind the glass. I was cleaning up the last of the tools when I noticed someone standing just inside the doorway, dripping water onto the floor. Her. She pushed her wet hair back, breath uneven from rushing. "Sorry, my wipers stopped working on the way home. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice was calm, but threaded with something thin and frayed. She tried to laugh it off, but it didn't land the way she wanted. It sounded like someone trying to pretend everything was fine while holding their whole life by the edges. "You're okay," I said, grabbing a towel and handing it to her. "You're lucky I'm still here." She took it with a soft, distracted thanks, avoiding my eyes for a moment too long, like she was embarrassed to need help again. The storm kept pounding outside, the door rattling slightly with each gust. I worked on the wipers while she waited inside the shop, arms wrapped around herself, not from cold, but from one of those quiet emotional storms no one else sees. When I finished and stepped back indoors, she was sitting on the workbench, staring at her phone screen. Her expression changed, barely, but I noticed. Something tightened around her mouth, and she clicked the screen off quickly when she saw me watching. "You good?" I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, then sighed. "It's just someone I used to rely on. Someone who now only calls when they need something." She didn't say X, but the word hung in the air between us, heavy, familiar. I didn't press. I just stood beside her, close, but not touching, listening to the rain hammer the roof like it was trying to drown the silence. She didn't move away. "Sometimes I think I'm too old for all this," she said quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the storm. Starting over. Explaining myself. Hoping things won't fall apart again. I glanced at her. The dim overhead lights softened the tension in her face, turning her tiredness into something almost fragile. And her shoulder, just slightly, leaned in my direction. Not enough to count as a choice. Just enough to feel like gravity was cheating. "You're not to anything," I said before I could stop myself. She looked up, and for a heartbeat, We weren't boss and customer, or older and younger. We were just two people suspended in the same moment, wanting something neither of us had the courage to name. Her hand rested on the bench near mine. Close. Inches, maybe less. She didn't pull it away. The rain softened for the first time all night, tapping instead of pounding. Her breathing matched the rhythm. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the faint hesitation in the way her fingers curled toward mine. Not reaching, just wondering. She turned her head slightly toward me. A small inhale, a shift of her knee toward mine. Something was about to happen, something we weren't supposed to want, but both of us suddenly couldn't seem to avoid. And then her phone vibrated sharply on the metal bench, startling her. The screen lit up with a name she tried to block with her palm, but not fast enough. She stood quickly, stepping back, putting inches, then feet, between us. "I should go," she said, voice steadier than her hands. The moment shattered like glass dropped on concrete. But as she reached the door, she paused, turned halfway, like she almost came back. She didn't come back the next day, or the day after. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that she was just a customer, that whatever almost happened in the stormlit shop had been a byproduct of weather and timing and her phone interrupting reality at exactly the right moment. But then, on the fourth day, she walked into the shop again, slowly, quietly, like someone entering a room she wasn't sure she was allowed in anymore. She didn't speak at first, and I didn't either. We just looked at each other, both pretending we weren't doing exactly that. "I shouldn't have disappeared," she said finally, voice low, steady in the same way someone is steady when they're trying not to reveal a crack. "You don't owe me anything," I said, but the words came out softer than I intended. Her eyes flicked up at me, sharp, searching, like she was trying to figure out whether I meant it or was hiding behind politeness. She took a slow breath, then walked past me toward the back of the shop where it was quieter, darker, safer. I followed without being asked. She stopped near the tool cabinet, turning to face me with her arms lightly folded, not defensively, just like she didn't know what else to do with them. "I've been thinking about that night," she said. My chest tightened. "Yeah, me too." A long silence stretched between us, thick, dense, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting to be touched. She glanced at the door as if expecting someone to burst in and end this before it started. No one did. "What are we doing?" she asked suddenly. Her voice wasn't angry or afraid, just tired in a way that made the question sound honest, almost painfully so. I swallowed. "I don't know." She nodded once, like she'd predicted that. Then she stepped a little closer, not enough to blur the line we kept pretending was there, but enough that I could see the faint trembling in her fingers as she tucked her hair behind her ear. "I can't play games," she said, eyes drifting downward. "Not at this point in my life. I can barely handle my own thoughts most days. I don't want to confuse someone else's." "You're not confusing me," I said. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't a lie either. She looked up sharply, like the words surprised her. For a moment she held my gaze, too long, too open, then looked away with a short, shaky exhale. "You're young," she whispered, almost angrily. "You're supposed to want simple things. Clear things." I stepped forward, just a fraction. "And what if I don't?" Her eyes flicked back to mine, and the rawness there made me stop breathing for a heartbeat. She wasn't guarded now. She wasn't composed. She wasn't anything she'd rehearsed. She was real, and hurting in ways I didn't fully understand. "We can't pretend this is nothing anymore," she said softly. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were romantic. They weren't. But because they shifted something in the air again, like every unspoken thought between us suddenly took shape. "You're right," I said. "We can't." Another silence. Longer this time. Heavier. Then she whispered, almost to herself, almost to me. "I just don't know if I'm strong enough to want something I'm not allowed to have." I didn't expect her to come back later that same evening. The shop had already closed, the lights dim, the air smelling like oil and metal cooling for the night. I was locking up when I saw her silhouette outside the glass door, still, quiet, like she was gathering the courage to knock but hadn't decided yet. When I opened the door, she didn't step inside. She just stood there under the flickering streetlight, a manila envelope clutched against her chest. I shouldn't be here, she said. But she didn't leave. Her hair was slightly windblown, her eyes tired in that deep, bone-level way. I held the door open, and after a long pause, she walked in, shoulders tense, fingers gripping the envelope like it was holding her together. I need to tell you something, she said, voice thin around the edges. I nodded, but she didn't continue. Instead, she placed the envelope gently on the counter between us, like she was setting down something fragile. It's not dramatic, she said. Just something I've been carrying around for too long. She opened the envelope and slid out a single photograph. A man, early 50s, smiling in a way that felt practiced, his arm around her shoulders. She wasn't smiling in the picture, not really, just enough to pass. This was 3 years ago, she said softly. We were together for almost a decade. I stayed quiet. He passed away, she added, not abruptly, but with this strange calm, like she'd said the words too many times for them to still break her, except they did. I could see it. The faint tremor in her jaw, the way she blinked once, too slowly. I'm sorry, I whispered. She shook her head. It's not about grief. Not anymore. She ran her thumb over the man's face. He was kind, predictable, good in all the ways someone is supposed to be. Her breath hitched, not a cry, just a crack of truth. But in the last couple of years, he stopped really seeing me. Not out of cruelty, just life, routine. She looked up at me then, eyes raw. And when he died, I didn't just feel loss. I felt relief. Her voice broke, a small, helpless sound. I have never said that out loud. My throat tightened. She pressed her palms to the counter like she was bracing herself against the confession. That's why I'm scared, she whispered. When you look at me, it's like I'm visible again, and I don't know if I deserve that. Something shifted in my chest. Pain, understanding, something I didn't have a name for. I stepped closer, just enough that she felt my presence. Not touching, not crossing anything, just offering space. You don't have to deserve it, I said quietly. It just is. She closed her eyes for a moment, a long, steady breath that looked like it hurt to take. When she opened them, her gaze drifted down to the photograph again, then to me. You look nothing like him, she said. Her voice was calm, almost steady. But there's something in the way you listen. It reminds me of how he used to be before life got too loud. The air pulsed softly between us. Warm, fragile, unsteady. She slid the photo back into the envelope, hands trembling. Then she looked at me. Really looked. And the words came out barely above a whisper. I don't know what scares me more, losing this, or wanting it in the first place. We didn't talk for a long moment after her confession. Not because there wasn't anything to say, there was too much, and neither of us trusted ourselves with it. The shop was dim except for the small desk lamp humming on the counter, throwing soft light across her face. It made her look different, somehow, less guarded but not exposed. Real in a way that felt earned. She stood with her hands pressed against the edge of the counter, shoulders rising and falling with slow, controlled breaths. I could see she was fighting the instinct to take it all back, to apologize for the weight of her honesty. Instead, she whispered, I didn't plan to tell you that. I know, and you weren't supposed to be the one who heard it. I know that too. She exhaled, a shaky breath that felt like it had been waiting years to leave her body. Then she reached for the envelope, hesitated, and drew her hand back, like touching the past again might undo every inch of progress she'd just made. I don't think I'm looking for anything, she said. Not defensive, not dismissive, just speaking the truth as carefully as she could. I don't want to hurt you, or myself. I leaned against the counter beside her, leaving a respectful few inches in between, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her arm. We're not doing anything, I said gently. We're just here. She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Being here with you feels like too much sometimes. I know, I said softly, but it doesn't feel wrong. She nodded once, slow. Not wrong, she echoed. Just dangerous. The rain outside started again, light this time, barely tapping the windows. She watched it for a moment, her eyes softening in a way I'd never seen before. Not sadness, not fear, something like acceptance. Can I ask you something? She murmured without looking at me. Yeah. Why didn't you step away that night in the storm? When it got too close. I thought about it. About her shoulder leaning in, the moment suspended between us, the electricity neither of us named. I didn't want to, I said simply. She closed her eyes briefly, as if the honesty hit harder than anything else I could have said. When she opened them again, she shifted slightly, just a fraction, so her arm brushed mine. A touch so small it could have been accidental. Except she didn't move away. We stood like that, the tiniest contact making the air between us feel too warm, too charged. And then her hand slipped to the counter again, fingers landing close to mine. Close enough that our knuckles almost touched. Almost. She didn't look at me when she moved her hand the final inch. Our fingers linked slowly, tentatively, like two people learning a new language in silence. No declarations. No promises. No big, cinematic ending. Just the quiet decision to stop running from what had already begun. She leaned her forehead lightly against my shoulder. Not a romantic gesture. Not yet. More like surrendering to a truth she'd been holding at arm's length for too long. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just let her be there, settling into the space between fear and something softer. Her voice, barely audible, drifted up through the quiet. Let's not pretend anymore. I think about that night more often than I should. Not because it was dramatic or life-changing in a way you'd put in a movie, but because it was quiet, real, unpolished. The kind of moment that stays under your skin long after you've stopped replaying it. Looking back now, from where I'm standing, I can see it wasn't the moment our lives changed. It was the moment we finally admitted they already had. We didn't become a couple overnight. There was no magical sunrise or perfect confession waiting around the corner. Instead, there were small choices, tiny ones, that slowly pulled us closer. She stopped apologizing for showing up. I stopped pretending I didn't wait for her to. We learned each other in the spaces between fear and possibility. She told me once, months later, that she didn't recognize the version of herself she'd become after years of being half listened to, half loved, half seen. I thought that was just adulthood, she said. You lose pieces and learn to live with whatever's left. But she didn't say it with sadness. More like relief, knowing she didn't have to stay that way. And me? I changed too. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way. Not in a she saved me way. More like she taught me to show up fully. To listen without waiting for my turn to speak. To slow down enough to notice things that mattered. The way her laughter always came a half second late. Like she was making sure she had permission to enjoy something. The way she'd run her thumb along her coffee cup when she was thinking. The way her eyes softened when she let herself trust someone. Love didn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It crept in like a familiar shadow, warm and steady, settling into places we never expected. We had hard days, misunderstandings, moments where fear tried to rewind everything. Age didn't disappear. Life didn't stop being complicated. We didn't magically fix each other, but we kept choosing the space between us. That was enough. Sometimes, late at night, she leans her head on my shoulder the exact same way she did in the shop, that quiet, steady way that makes the whole world feel like it's exhaling. And every time she does, I'm pulled back to that moment. The dim lights, the smell of oil, her breath soft against my shirt, the weight of something new forming in the silence. Back then, I didn't know what we were becoming. Now, I just know that love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hesitates. Sometimes it looks like two people sitting in the dark, choosing not to pretend anymore. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments.